fingers crossed on this one. So these grants have been a really great relationship building exercise with our member agencies as well as the City of San Jose. And so moving forward, we will continue to identify and pursue grants that align with SVCE's mission and can have a large impact regionally. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you. Question from Director Wally.
This is fabulous. This feeds exactly into a conversation I was having 2 days ago with my city manager. I've said this numerous times, rich CEOs in my city, but poor city, we don't have the money. And SVC has done a fabulous job in the last 2 years, Zoe, Tony, and all the decarbonization work and everything. If I'm missing some names, my apology. It's in the interest of time. This was a conversation I was having. How can we apply for grants? Because money is short in my city. And this feeds directly into, because I was talking of how are we going to apply for IRA, and staff limitation means so many hours spent on grants. As this one pointed out, we don't get awarded. Same thing for my city. So this is just exciting beyond words. Fabulous.
Yes, Tom. Sorry, I didn't realize you'd entered.
She's official now.
Yeah, so just for the record, Vice Chair Matichak is here. And just because of that, now Director Meadows is officially part of our board. So thank you, Vice Chair.
I apologize for being late. This is my 4th meeting with SVCE this week. You think I'd get it right on the 4th time. Anyways, I echo everything that Tina said. So, and I think it's really important to pursue these grants so that we're able to do more work for our mission. So I just wanted to chime in.
Thank you. And just to let, we do provide this information to the board as well. When we do apply for grants, we take them to the board for their approval. This is what we've been asking for in the past to participate in these grants, since they could require, if we're awarded, use of staff resources.
Obligations.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. One thing that would be useful, at least in my opinion, from a board standpoint, if you're doing, and I say from a regional effort, the more jurisdictions you're trying to get involved, the better. If you can inform the jurisdiction representatives from a board member standpoint of when you're doing outreach, because there are a few, looking at these the applications, it's like there are questions, and when this came to the board, it was like, why didn't my city say yes or join in? And I think we don't always know what either our staff or city manager have responded, but by the time the application process has been finalized and being applied, often we're like, okay, we can now go back, but we've missed our deadline. And so when you're trying to build the coalition, if you could tell the board members, that, okay, we're trying to go out for this grant, and here are the cities that have said yes, and here's the city we haven't heard back from or said no. At that point, it's conceivably easier for us to, whoever the rep is, to apply pressure to the city manager or staff, just to try to make it that much stronger from a group standpoint.
When you say rep, you mean board member, not
board
the staff.
Member.
I just
Correct.
wanted to be very clear.
Yes, the board member.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, we took the whole half hour.
Any other questions for Monica or any other staff that were presenting? Seeing none, are there any members of the public who wish to have a comment? Is there anyone remote? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 5, Green Prime product and rate methodology approval. Zach will be presenting.
Alrighty. Good morning, directors. I think Don Bray is also on. If
yes,
Don, you'd like to kick us off here?
Sure. Can everyone hear me here? And I apologize for not being on camera due to some bandwidth issues at home. But yeah, before we dive in, I'll provide some brief orientation on this topic, sort of a trip down memory lane for everyone here. Green Prime, of course, is our 100% renewable product. Customers can opt up to Green Prime anytime they want and back down to Green Start if they wish. Green Prime is currently about 5% of SVCE's overall volume. Most Green Prime is purchased actually by our member agencies for their municipal operations and by some of our CNI customers. Late last year, we doubled the Green Prime premium to $0.015 per kilowatt hour, and this was due to a big run up in REC costs and difficulty finding Green E certified RECs, which we are using to supply Green Prime. We also decided to discontinue Green E certification to actually make sourcing Green Prime easier and a little less expensive. In the last few months, we've been working on a strategic refresh of how we think about planning, sourcing, and pricing Green Prime, really thinking about Green Prime and Green Start together as opposed to separately like we had done historically. Next slide, please. So our request of you all today is starting in 2025, we want to reprice the Green Prime premium over Green Start based on an updated methodology that balances a portfolio renewable energy credits. So the portfolio that we use to source Green Prime or Green Start as well, and value it along with a marginal REC cost if additional RECs are needed to cover Green Prime. We also want to cap participation in Green Prime at 200 gigawatt hours per year, which is about exactly 5% of our overall volume, and cap participation for any one customer at 20 gigawatt hours per year. We'll go into more detail on this, but this just to give you the top line here at the start is what we're going to be asking you for. Next slide, please. So in terms of our goals, we want to establish a longer-term roadmap with year-over-year RPS targets for Green Start and Green Prime to really think about these two products together. That's what's going to be efficient for us longer term. We want to update the positioning of Green Prime and establish more certainty around Green Prime RPS needs going forward. We also want to plan for uncertainty in RPS deliveries from our existing PPAs and plan for some uncertainty in terms of when new PPAs come online. And we want to think about that uncertainty relative to Green Prime pricing because it is what uses sort of the marginal REC, if you will. And then fourthly, we want to establish an updated methodology for valuing Green Prime to avoid cross-subsidization with Green Start and to ideally avoid year-over-year price shocks, so to do some calibration of rate changes over time. So those are the reasons why we've stepped back to do this refresh. Zach will take you through the details here.
All righty. Thank you, Don. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. I think much of this was covered right on Green Prime history. It's been something SVC's offered since the very beginning. Opt-up product. It's a mix of large CNI member agencies, some residential customers, 100% renewable, typically solar and wind sources. And what we've done is now that we are building out a robust portfolio of long-term projects that we're not looking at next year, we're looking at the next decade and what does our planning take us in terms of the products we have. And so over time, we're going to be continuing to add renewable resources. And so how do we make sure that both Green Start and Green Prime can get some benefit of that? And we think we have a proposal today that will do that, where Green Prime is going to receive some portfolio benefit, but it still is a premium product. It requires some supply from the market that we think is a an equitable solution. Go to the next slide. So as we look at this, we have officially a goal to be 75% renewable by 2030. And so beyond that, and I think a presentation you'll hear from Marin later this morning, see where we're looking at the future. But as you can see that line, it's the three bars would be, one is Green Start, one is Green Prime, and then our overall RPS. And so Green Prime's always been 100%. Green Start is going to continue to rise over time as our portfolio gets more and more renewable. And so it leaves the question, what does Green Prime look like in the long term? So what we're coming up with today and what we've been working on for the last several months is really puts that thought in mind. Next slide, please. So as Don highlighted in the recommendation, we're looking at capping the program at about 200 gigawatt hours, which right now represents about 5% of our overall load. And over time, our load could increase, but we think keeping this program at 200 provides that premium level that is really only for customers that really need and want it. And we think that at 200 and then also at 20 gigawatt hours per customer is the right sort of tolerances, that we have some buffer within those, that there's some opportunity for growth with that. But anything larger than that 20 gigawatt hour level is really something where if it's someone in the large CNI space, we should really consider some type of deal that we can work out through our non-standard pricing policy. Next slide. So how do we come up with the
Quick question.
Question. When a customer goes to CNI, then they're taken out of this equation. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So on this slide, this is kind of the math behind how we come up with the supply from the portfolio that Green Prime is eligible for. So we have, in this example, say 2,000 gigawatt hours of portfolio RPS of renewable energy in our portfolio. What we first do is we take a margin of error of 15% off of that to account for uncertainty in RPS deliveries, in potential of PPAs facing delays or challenges meeting COD. And then we say, okay, there's 1,700 gigawatt hours that are eligible to go to Green Prime. And from that, Green Prime would get its respective load share as 5%. So 5% of 1,700 is 85. And if the Green Prime program overall is 200 gigawatt hours, that means that 115 gigawatt hours would need to come from the market. All right, next slide, please. And then so translating that from a quantity perspective into a dollars per kilowatt hour premium perspective, we look at the Green Prime premium. So we're starting with, if Green Prime is 100% RPS, take the differential with what is a Green Start level. And so in that illustrative example, you can see the first line, 100% minus Green Start RPS. What is a Green Start RPS? In this example, say it's 50%. And then we multiply that, the difference between that, which is so 50% multiplied by the weighted average RPS price. And it isn't shown here, but to keep the formula legible in a PowerPoint, behind this is also a differential between RPS and carbon-free pricing. So when someone steps up into Green Prime, we no longer have to procure carbon-free on their behalf for that additional incremental quantity. And so that is an avoided cost, so to speak. So that weighted average price in this example we say is $60 for RPS, and the avoided carbon-free is say $30. And so 50% times that $30 gets us to $15 per megawatt hour, or 1.5 cents. And I think this is in general been how we've come up with the premium in years past, but what wasn't a significant factor was this weighted average RPS price from the portfolio. Since our portfolio has now become more and more reliant on long-term PPAs that have a different value structure than, say, a short-term renewable supply that we may otherwise procure in the market on a year-to-year basis. And so one question.
So your example is, it's exactly the same as it is now, but now it can float. Does that summarize it?
Yes.
Okay.
And with this, we think that what we're applying here is also looking at this on a rolling 4-year average. So instead of just coming up with 1 year, we take a longer lens, what we think prices are going to, or the cost of serving this product is going to be in the prior year, and then in 3 forward years. And so we think that it strikes the right balance of ensuring that there is a premium involved, but it also does not cross-subsidize where the Green Prime product isn't being subsidized by Green Start customers. And so if we go to the next slide, I think it's our request to the executive committee that Don highlighted up front. And any questions for Don and I?
Thank you.
Just one addition. We also would like to know if this can be added to consent for the November board meeting, because we have a very busy November board meeting already. So if you wouldn't mind adding that to your motion.
Questions? Sure. Vice Chair.
I don't have a question, I have a comment, so after you
Okay, let's go through questions first, then we'll go to the public and then go back to comments. So part of this, and I understand the rolling average, and that makes sense. You talked to basically 10 customers with a maximum of 20 gigawatts per customer. Do we have any customers that want Green Prime right now that are close to that? Well, just trying to getting a better idea of what we're, you're basically saying there's a maximum of 10 full customers, but why 20 gig is the max?
We do have one currently who's approaching that number. The others are all lower. We have had some customers that were considerably higher than 20 in the past, who have opted back down to Green Start for one reason or another. And if they were to come back to us again and say, hey, we'd like 50 or 60 or some number like that, we'd say we want to introduce you to one of our long-term arrangements, right, under the non-standard pricing agreement. So that's going to be our approach, which I think works nicely in terms of kind of thinking about thresholds at which we direct customers to a different offer.
Okay, and that was kind of one of my main question here, because it's like 20 doesn't seem, 20 makes sense. It seems a little arbitrary if they're wanting to basically be on Green Prime and trying to be better corporate citizens at the end of the day. And so as long as there's a path to, whether or not that's a specific path for that customer, it makes sense. Any other questions from the directors? Seeing none, we'll go to the public. Go ahead, 3 minutes.
Yes, so Zach, I have a couple of questions. One is, given that this year and next year, Green Start won't be carbon free, I would think that there would be a significant demand for Green Prime from folks who aren't on it. And so with a 20 or 200 gigawatt hour cap, how will you accommodate, or how can the agency accommodate non-C&I customers who want to be as green as they possibly can be? And the other is, I thought, given how many contracts the agency has entered into, that the 5% of 1,700 gigawatt hours didn't really provide as much benefit from the existing portfolio of renewable RPS resources. And is it less expensive to go out and get those marginal resources that you showed? I'm a little bit confused about that. So perhaps you could address that.
Thank you. Let's, as opposed to answer directly, is there any other member of the public wishing to speak?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, and it's up to Monica whether or not we answer now or bring it back, move forward.
Sure. Zach, if you have a quick answer to that, if not, we can certainly follow up with Mr. Carney.
Yeah, I think probably a follow-up would be helpful. It it may get in the weeds a little bit.
Is that okay? All right. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you. So we'll close the public and bring it back to the directors for comments before we have a motion. Vice Chair?
Yes, I like what's been done, and I think we've been talking about this for a while. I don't move the needle as a residential customer, but I pay a lot for, I consume a lot of electricity. And I left Green Prime because several months ago. I like this to the extent that Green Prime is used by municipalities to meet their climate action plan. I think this is a product that is super important for us, as you raised with your question. We've been working on this issue for a while now, so I really like the evolution of it and where we're going and turning it into a floating price. I think that's good for everyone. And my second and final comment is if a customer wants Green Prime and they're hitting the cap, then moving them to CNI, I think, is exactly what we want to do. And to be able to offer that service, I think is really valuable. And I think that's a leading practice for other CCAs to be able to migrate their customers to a CNI. So I'll be definitely supporting this as amended.
Just go into consent.
Yeah, that it goes into consent.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion, including going into consent.
I second that and support what staff has done. Great job. Thank you.
And I agree. It makes sense as far as a transition, and especially as we're looking at to incentivize Green Prime, but then trying to make sure we deal with our bigger customers correctly. So I'm fully in. And as far as moving to consent, will this presentation be also provided to the board or?
No, it'll just be the staff report.
Okay.
We'll provide the details in the staff report.
Okay. They're just wanting to make sure because it's.
Yeah, we don't present
clear.
consent.
I understand. No, but I'm wondering from a presentation standpoint
could we attach it? Yeah, we could do that.
it.
We could attach the executive committee.
That makes it easier.
Yeah, for sure.
To read as opposed to reading pages and pages. I think you did a great job with the staff report. So I do think it helps kind of for me, I kind of jump back and forth between the two quite often. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And with that, can we have roll call?
Chair Klein?
Yes.
Vice Chair Mikuchak?
Aye.
Director Tyson?
Yes.
Walia?
Aye.
Meadows?
Aye.
Ms. Beltran?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Very good. With that, we'll move on to item 6, recommend the SVCE Board of Directors approve a delegation of authority allowing the CEO to purchase carbon-free nuclear energy for 2025 to 2027.
So Chris Van Vector, the Director of Power Resources, is going to make the presentation, but just a little bit of context here. As mentioned by Mr. Carney, the board did allow us to relax our target for 100% carbon-free or clean in 2024 and 2025. But we kept looking for resources, as we told the board we would do. And so we did find an opportunity. It is something that we didn't expect to see, and it's a form of carbon-free nuclear energy coming from Palo Verde, which is a nuclear power plant that serves some of Southern California utilities. We don't currently have that authority to buy nuclear energy beyond, I think, 2025. And it was mostly just to get the allocations plus that short-term procurement. So Chris and his team have done a fabulous job to line up a resource. And so we're seeking approval from the executive committee. Chris, you're on.
Thanks, Monica. So yeah, the request here of the executive committee is on the next slide. And that's to recommend to the SVCE Board of Directors the delegation of authority allowing the Chief Executive Officer to execute agreements to purchase carbon-free nuclear energy with the following conditions: delivery in calendar years 2025 through 2027, pay volume not to exceed 750,000 megawatt hours per year, executed with any company via a WSPP agreement. The expected dollar amount per year would be around 10.8 million. So next slide. So just a little bit on the history of SVCE and nuclear power. This just will allow us to purchase more nuclear carbon-free attributes out into the future. But in 2020, SVE started to accept the nuclear power allocations from PG&E for the Diablo Canyon power plant. This authority was only for allocations and did not accept procurement. So due to shrinking availability of large hydro carbon-free attributes, staff requested the transaction authority to procure these attributes nuclear in 2024. At the June board meeting this year, SVE staff requested the ability to procure these attributes for 2025 within certain budget constraints for fiscal year 24-25. And then through the Clean Pathways Initiative for analysis and recommendation, SVC will further define carbon-free to align with SB 100 defined resources. And so carbon-free attributes will be large hydro and nuclear. So it'll be part of our procurement. Please. So if this transaction goes through, this would be the impact to our claim position. So this is a unit contingent transaction. So this would be the upper end, right? The unit could deliver less because it's the nature of these resources. But for 2025 at 750,000, this would bring our claim position to 101, 102%. 2026, almost 104%. And in 2027, we would exceed 110%. So if executed, the CEO will report to the board volume, term, and counterparty. This will increase our operating budget, and it will be included as part of our fiscal year 24-25 budget update in December 24. Next slide. And so we're back to our request. So I won't go over it again, but yeah, just recommend the delegation of authority. So are there any questions?
Thank you. Question? First, Director Tyson.
Yes, earlier in the meeting, we had a discussion about how the CCA's one of their issues is affordability. And the carefully hidden engineer in me took your numbers and said it's roughly $14 per megawatt hour, which is extremely attractive. And would you say I'm halfway close to correct, and it would help us in terms of providing that affordability?
We think it's a good deal.
Right. And note carefully hidden, like you couldn't tell.
Thank you. Director Walia.
Maybe we added a cushion.
Director Walia.
Thank you. So having said that, Chris also mentioned there could be an increase in the budget. That's what I would like to understand.
Yeah, so when we took the fiscal year 24-25 budget to the board, we also had the discussion about how much carbon-free we should pursue for that fiscal year or calendar year 25. And we were given a limit of, I think it was like $15 million. And we've already procured some additional resources for fiscal year 24-25 carbon-free. So given that threshold that we had, we would actually exceed it. So when we go to the board in December, when Amrit brings an update on the budget, if this transaction is approved, we would include those additional dollars in the budget.
So this will be within the threshold because this is 10.8?
No, it'll exceed the threshold. So that's why we'll have to amend the budget to
They
include
already
this.
spent their 15.
Oh, they already spent the 50?
Part of the 50.
Okay, so we'll be adding another 10.8? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Whatever's
We don't know the exact numbers yet because it depends on what we end up negotiating, and we have to go back and see how much we spent relative to that $15 million limit that was given. So we're working on that.
Okay.
We'll have the details provided in the budget update.
Okay, but it's not going to be more than that, is what I'm trying to understand. Because we are doing an action item here now, recommending without knowing the impact on the budget. That's why I'm asking that question.
Yes, it can't be more than 10.8 because you can't.
Because
spend
that's
more than
what,
15.
exactly. So I just wanted to say that for the
Yes, this would
record.
only be 10.8 million.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair?
What the board has decided is we're going to procure some nuclear, but this is merely a execution of that. We're not making a decision. We're just delegating the authority through this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. This allows us to have the conversation with sellers and to know that we can actually transact.
Right, but the board has said we're going to do this. So this is just,
No.
we are going to we can include nuclear.
Yes, if you approve if you approve our motion, we'll go to the board in November with a request for the authority delegated to me. So we still need to do that step.
The board approves. I recommend.
Right, but the board has already said we want.
Yes,
correct.
That's my point. This isn't a policy. This is just executing that policy.
Correct.
And that was, Brian, it does, Director Makachek, it does extend our authority in 26 and 27, right? We have authority up to 25, I think is kind of 2 months.
We don't have that right now.
Right. And that was going to lead to
I hear you.
that was going to lead to my question. Should this be consent? Or because we've already given direction from a board?
That's a good point.
And we kind of said, okay, there's 15 million. If it's slightly more than that in order to meet this,
Yes.
giving you that authority.
Yes. We would like this to be on consent too, by the way.
Okay, just double checking. So that should be part of the motion when we get to a motion standpoint. Are there any other questions? I know Sally? Sorry,
Yeah, I was going to the same point. This isn't actually changing the policy. This is enacting the directive that the board gave to achieve clean. So if it was a policy change, that's a whole different matter, but it's not. So I support where you've all gone in this conversation.
Okay, thank you. And then and love to hear. Director.
I'll just echo that. Sure.
Okay. And quick question. So I know that I'm happy to see, and we've had lots of discussion about nuclear energy. Is there opportunity beyond this for, we were surprised, and it sounds like staff was surprised that this became available. Is this an opportunity beyond the period here, 25 to 27? Is there opportunity to continue this?
Yeah, I'll let Chris answer that question.
That's to be determined. I think we're kind of at the beginnings of this, so we'll see where it takes us. But the way this kind of comes into the market, it only really comes in 3 pieces.
Great.
Yeah, the other bigger part of this is I'm sorry, Director Martinez.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I just wondered if this placed us in a better position to be kind of first at the table to take an opportunity if it does come up.
I think that's probably true. I think we would probably be the first call.
Great. Thank you.
One of the things that when we used to receive the Diablo Canyon nuclear allocation, that is the load serving entities and CCAs would get it, we had the ability to resell those attributes if you didn't want to take them. When the Diablo Canyon resource went into a state resource, they took away that opportunity from us. But it's something that we still think is important, and we continue to figure out how we can advocate for it at the regulatory level. So if that materializes, then there could be an opportunity for us to procure additional nuclear from other entities who don't want to take it. So, but right now, that's kind of a long shot, I would say.
We don't want to be that long. If we purchase and can't sell it.
Yeah.
Is that what you meant?
Oh, no. It would be for other entities, like say, for example, San Francisco. clean power. Right now, if they get the allocation from Diablo Canyon, which, maybe they want to do because they get some resource adequacy attributes or some other benefit, but say they didn't want to take the full amount, right now they can't sell any surplus allocation to anybody else. In the past they could, but the rules changed. So we're trying to see if there's an opportunity to go back to the old rules.
How do you do that work with CPUC or?
Yeah. Through
That's it, that's fine, no problem.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak? Anyone remote wishing to speak? Okay, is there a motion? Okay, Vice Chair.
I'll make the motion to accept the recommendation put forward by staff and to put it on consent.
Second.
Thank you. May we have roll call, or maybe we have a vote?
Chair Klein,
Yes?
Vice Chair Mekichuk,
Aye.
Director Tyson.
Yes.
Walia,
Aye.
Meadows,
Yes.
Ms. Patran.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Chris. We'll move back to item number 3. Recommend the SVCE Board of Directors adopt SVCE's long-term clean targets.
Yeah, just quickly, this is the final part, we hope, of this process. Maureen shared with the executive committee and the board our findings and where we were leaning towards, but did not have an actual recommendation. Today, she'll actually provide a recommendation on how to position ourselves and what to plan for long-term with respect to clean and how much RPS or renewable portfolio standard versus overall clean.
Thanks, Monica. All right, so as far as what we're going to cover today, our plan is first to give a quick recap of what we talked about at the September board meeting. Then we'll walk through some potential targets SVC could adopt, including 2 new targets that we didn't talk about last September. We'll run through some other considerations that we want to highlight for you all, and then we will get to our staff recommendation. So as a quick reminder, when we came to the board in September, we had a lot of questions, a lot of policy and planning questions, but the 2 big issues on the table were, what type of clean target do we want to set, and by what point do we want to achieve that target? And so at the meeting, we presented a number of findings from a study that E3 did for us, looking at a number of different clean pathways, what the build, rate, impact, and cost of achieving those different pathways would be. We talked a lot about uncertainty due to market conditions, load, and regulatory risk, especially uncertainty around our allocations from PG&E and the new central procurement entity. And our takeaway as staff was that overall there was support for not adopting a full 24/7 hourly target given all the risk, but there was a general desire to move beyond 100% clean on an annual basis. So since that meeting, we've gone back and had some internal conversations. There will be a couple of new clean targets that we'll talk about today, as I mentioned. We also wanted to clarify our definition of clean going forward, and also talk a little bit about some uncertainty bands that we would like to add. So as a quick reminder, our results suggested that if we kept to 100% clean target, we would need about 664 megawatts of new capacity, or the equivalent, by 2035. And if we moved up to an hourly target, that number would jump up to over 2,300 megawatts, which was going to be pretty difficult to achieve. We also talked about sort of the, probability of achieving something and how that could impact our needs, as well as the fact that wind resources are really pretty clearly a significant contributor to hourly matching. So there was some value in reducing emissions if you think about the hourly timeframe. Another big topic at that meeting was exactly how much this would cost. We estimated that relative to the 90% case, which is really minimum compliance, it would cost an additional $300 million a year to achieve a hourly portfolio. And a big theme of that conversation was, what the potential risk around that cost would look like, right? And so We estimate that a lot of those costs could have been offset by potential revenue, but what you were really doing there is exposing your portfolio and therefore our customers to a lot of market risk. And so I think that was the big thing that we were trying to avoid. So at the end of that presentation, we sort of quickly summarized, the landscape of opportunities that we were at least looking at that time. As I mentioned, I think the general consensus was that maybe hourly was too expensive and too risky, but that, once again, perhaps going beyond just an annual target would make sense. So this gets us to our sort of new material here. So one topic that came up during the conversation was whether or not it might make sense to do a monthly target. And so here, essentially what you would do is you'd build out your long-term portfolio, and then you would purchase monthly short-term RECs or carbon-free to fill any gaps. And that would get you closer to 24/7 than an annual requirement, right? There is some seasonal variation. So right now, in general, the grid is very clean in the spring. So if you're trying to get to 100%, theoretically, you can lean a little bit in the spring, sort of go long and then make up or sort of utilize that in the summer when it's harder to stay clean. But fundamentally, emissions follow a daily pattern, right? There's the duck curve, and every day you have to account for that. So we think the daily pattern is more impactful than the seasonal pattern. The other concern when we thought through the monthly option is that it's not really the way RECs are sold today. And so we thought it'd be expensive and difficult to do. And so ultimately, our staff recommendation is not to use monthly going forward. The other potential metric that we thought about was really a PPA GHG metric. And so the theory here is that for any new long-term contract that you're entering into, you would assess how that resource would impact emissions for the SVCE portfolio. And so we don't have exact details on how we'll do this yet, but essentially you would look at, for each project, how the expected dispatch compares to emissions in a given hour, and see whether or not the project is reducing total system emissions. We think that this will ensure that our portfolio on a long-term basis is moving towards hourly, but it's not going to sort of island SVCE, so that's a big benefit of that one. Potential reasons not to do this is right now when we evaluate our PPAs, we are primarily looking at project risk and the economic value of the projects. Necessarily, if you're adding more of an emissions look, it means that you're going to weight those other metrics a little bit less. And then, of course, this relies on having a forecast of the emissions for the grid, which may not be completely accurate. One thing we want to flag here is that the CEO actually already has authority to establish evaluation metrics. And we have used GHG in previous evaluations, but really what we're recommending is that we would monitor and report these out. And so the way that we would do that, well, let me start with the ways we could potentially do it. Right, so we know that starting in 2028, we will have to begin reporting hourly emissions as part of SB 1158. And we've talked in the past about the fact there's a number of ways that hourly emissions can be calculated. Right, so you can use the carbon-free energy score, which is what Google uses. You can really make it a binary decision, right? Either yes, SVC's clean portfolio met demand in a given hour, or no, it did not. Or you can calculate how much of our clean portfolio met demand in a given hour. Because the CFE score relies on the CAISO emissions factor in a given hour, and SVC really doesn't have control over when the CAISO is dispatching emissions, we actually are not recommending that we report that out to the board. But we do think the other two metrics, both how many hours SVC was 100% clean, and sort of something like a heat map like this where we would show, how we're covering those hours over, sort of a 12 by 24 basis, we think would be helpful for the board to see, so that over time, hopefully you can see that progress as we get to a cleaner and cleaner hourly portfolio.
That's my favorite slide or map of the whole day.
Put it in just for
Really
you.
looking forward to that.
It's not green enough.
Not
yet.
where to go.
That was hypothetical, by the way, the illustrative, it's not,
That's not actual?
well, maybe.
No, no.
So those are the two sort of the metrics that we've been thinking through. We did want to highlight a couple of other things for you all today before we get to the recommendation. One is really talking about eligible resources. I know in the past we've talked a little bit about incrementality and the importance of making sure that, you know, the new resources you bring on are clean. We think the GHG metric does that. And so what we would suggest is that Chris and his team can continue to go out and procure both new and existing resources. As we talked about just a moment ago, that would include large hydro, nuclear, and then also RPS eligible resources. The one thing we wanted to note here is that due to the shift from RPS compliance to SB 100 compliance, there's a chance that the power content categories or the PCC buckets might shift post 2030. So if that happens, we'll come back to the board and have a conversation about what to focus and prioritize procuring. Another issue that I think we've talked a little bit about in the past is that of line losses. And so a number of compliance obligations, most notably probably SB 100, is based on retail sales. But SVCE has historically covered the line losses, so essentially the energy lost over transmission and distribution lines as part of our 100% clean goal. And we're recommending that we continue to do that. And so our target for 100% clean would include that number. The other thing I'll note is that the new power content label rules do require that LSCs show for their line losses. And so this would be consistent with the PCL regulations. Historically, those losses have been assumed to be about 6%. But under these new power content label regulations, they're going to be calculated on a more regular basis. So there is some additional risk and volatility in how that number will change over time, potentially. Yes.
Would that help drive local generation? I would think so. And that's kind of makes sense from a strategy regulatory perspective.
Yeah, it's a good question. The power content label rules haven't been finalized quite yet. The way it's written right now, there will be a default line loss rating that an LSC can use, or they have the option to provide their own, but they have to justify that. So yes, in theory, if you had a lot of local generation, you might want to provide your own numbers.
Thank you.
All right, so speaking a bit more about uncertainty, this is sort of a combined graphic of some of the things that we showed in the September meeting. So the red lines here represent the band of uncertainty around our load forecast. And the hatched portfolio at the top is really our potential allocations, the nuclear allocation, hydro allocation, and the potential allocation from the central procurement entity. And so what this is really showing is that in a low load scenario, we're already at 100% clean if we get all of the allocations. Obviously, in a high load scenario, we have quite a bit that we would need to do. Importantly, this graphic does not include any subsequent central procurement orders or procurement orders. So we might have more that we're forced to buy. And as we talked about in September, SVCE has generally utilized a laddering strategy that allows us to have both our long-term and short-term contracts balanced a bit. And so this level of uncertainty and that need to, or that desire to bring in contracts over time means that we really have to balance these uncertainties and think through exactly how we're going to bring things into the portfolio. One of the challenges with that is if you don't want to purchase everything long-term, sometimes the short-term market dries up, which I think is what we saw last year. And, as Chris just presented on, sometimes opportunities pop up that allow you to fill gaps as well. So one of the things that we're recommending today is that we would add a uncertainty band to our clean targets going forward. And so what we would suggest is that, and maybe I'll just jump to the suggestions actually, is that we would maintain our current target of 75% RPS through 2034 with 106% clean, because once again, we're covering the line losses there through that time period. And then as we move to 2035 and beyond, we would target 100% RPS and 106% clean measured annually. But we would then allow for a 10% margin of error on the targets to help manage risk. And we would only return to the board if that shortfall exceeds that 10% target. Once again, that would, not be our goal by any means. We would be trying to hit these targets, but this is, if there's short-term market fluctuations or our load suddenly grows or whatever it might be, we would still have that allowance for that margin of error. Additionally, we think it would make sense to direct staff to include that GHG emissions impact as part of our PPA evaluation process, to direct us to report on an annual basis the number of clean hours in each year. And then, as Chris mentioned earlier, to define clean to align with the state definition under SB 100, which would include RPS eligible resources, nuclear, and large hydro. And I think that's my last slide. So turn it back to the chair for any questions or
Questions? So
No, I was going to defer to someone else to go
That's
first.
fine. I guess I'll start. When you talk about the 10% margin of error, is that quarterly, monthly? What granularity are you, when do you raise this issue and how quickly does it come back to the board, if we're not meeting our target?
Yeah, I think that would be on an annual basis because those targets are still annual.
Okay.
I think the intent is that if we think we're in a position where we're unlikely to hit the target or if we're going to exceed that 10%, then we would go to the board.
Okay, and so that would be like, so but it's a once a year report. And I'm just trying to see from a timeliness standpoint, it's like we're December and guess what? We're not going to meet it because we report in January. Or, is it kind of a rolling evaluation of margin of error in that 10%? I'm just trying to see, yes, it's once a year, but how closely are we monitoring that? Because I do think that plays into. And I know we're not going to say, oh, we're missing it this month, so we need to bring it to the board, but just trying to get a better idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think the intent is that those two, the hourly and sort of the heat map would be reported out annually.
Okay.
But that if we are looking like we're going to, miss the target by that more than 10%, we would come to the board sooner. I don't know, Monica, if you have any other.
I think kind of like how we found what happened in 2024. We were out in the market looking for the resources, not really realizing that the end of the compliance period was going to put such a huge demand on RPS resources and then suck up a whole bunch of carbon-free resources for other reasons.
Right.
We didn't see that until kind of mid-year. Right? And so then we came to the board and said, there's just no way we can hit this target, right? So it was a little bit too late, even though we couldn't change the outcome. And for 2025, this time we came way in advance, right? We said during the budget cycle, we said we're not going to be able to hit it. I would imagine that we would align it with the budget cycle. So that kind of like we did for calendar year 25, we would bring it as part of when we're creating our assumptions for what's going to go into our budget. That a very big part of that is what we expect our position to be the next 12 months. And so that's when we would bring it, saying, heads up, we're going to be at 10% or below 10%, or we're going to hit the target. So, but we can include that in the recommendation too. That we report where we are with respect to those tolerance bands at the prior fiscal year budget process.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Vice Chair?
As I look at this, I'm kind of wondering, I think there's the supply and the demand. And on the supply side, regionalization may affect the supply of clean energy, I think, for us. And so that's an unknown. And then I'm wondering on the demand side, and if you think of that, the heat map that everyone likes, if you move to real-time pricing and or the PG&E, the other entities change their pricing, and since we're driven by PG&E, I'd say PG&E's pricing, right? That may affect the demand, so in the future. So there's a number of unknowns going forward, obviously. So I'm thinking of those changes. If we make a decision today, it's not going to be that way forever because the future's dynamic, and all we're trying to do is adjust things now to keep on refining and getting better as we go forward. If you could put the slide 15 up, please. It's the next slide. I just wanted to kind of go through these and make sure that we all understand them. So clean measured annually, that is a calendar year or a fiscal year? That's my question. Or a compliance year. And what's the compliance year?
How have we historically done it?
Calendar year. Yeah, that aligns with compliance year.
Compliance year equals our measurement year. Okay. So that's, I get that. Allow 10% margin of error. So that, as we go forward, that in the future could change as if we think it's higher or lower, right? But for at this point in time, we're saying 10%.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah, the one thing I'll point out is that once you get to 2045, the compliance obligation is that 100% on retail sales. So you could no longer have a full 10% because you no longer hit your SB 100 compliance.
Okay. Go back to 15 or go forward to 15.
It's 15.
Direct staff to include, I think that bullet is really good. I support that. Direct staff to report on an annual basis. So that's the calendar year, right? The second bullet point?
Yeah, so that will be after the fact, right?
Right.
And so that'll be an after the fact report on what we actually achieved.
So what's our lag in that? Is it a 1 month? Is it 2 months?
No,
Is it
it's
3 months?
usually-
Is it 6 months?
It's usually 3 to 6 months because we have to wait for all the actual data to come in and be what we call settlement quality. And so it takes a while to get that.
Okay. And would we have a projection?
Yeah,
of
we'll
what
have
it-
an estimate
Oh,
because
okay.
we can provide the estimate when we provide the estimate of what we think our clean position is going to be at budget time as part of that discussion.
Okay, and I have no questions on the final bullet, the last bullet point. Sorry, I just wanted to go through to make sure that we and the public understand this.
Yep.
Absolutely. Any other questions? We'll go to public.
I don't usually do 3, but first, a huge compliment to Maren. Your presentation in September was one of the best presentations I've ever seen on this topic. This was equally wonderful. It's thrilling to me to know that this level of thought is being put into the ultra important issue of how do we decarbonize affordably and with the resources that are likely to be available on the market. You talked about one metric that you did not think it made sense to present to the board. I'd like to request that you think about that again, because as a young baseball fan, I know that the statistics available were much fewer in number than are now. So there was a thing called slugging percentage that was invented, an on-base percentage. And the Oakland A's 20 years ago used the on-base percentage as a way to select players, and they won the American League Championship because they had this insight. So maybe the board members won't like it, won't understand it, might even potentially be misguided by additional statistics. But I think you should offer them to them and to the public so that we can think about things perhaps in a different way that the simpler numbers don't allow us to do. What else? Could you go back to slide 15 for just a second? Oh, okay. So looking at the first bullet under additionally, direct staff to include GHG emissions impact. I would love the GHG emissions impact to be in the budget using the $190 per metric ton social cost of carbon that the federal government established last year. Because, comparing dollars to dollars helps drive decisions in the appropriate direction. And I don't believe I've ever seen a presentation to SVCE that used the social cost of carbon and presented it to the board. And I think that would be a helpful stat, just like slugging percentage.
Thank you. Any other remote participants wishing to speak on this item?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay. Any other comments or a motion?
I'll make a comment now that I've asked my questions, and it echoes what I said before. I think the direction we're going in is really good. I think there's a lot of thought leadership in there for other CCAs, and I think you have some ideas going forward. But in terms of where we are today, I will support this, and I would like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
So I'll make the motion to approve staff's recommendations going forward.
Thank you.
I'm happy to.
Seconded by Walia.
And I agree with what has been said in the interest of time.
Sure. Thank you. Do we have a vote?
Yes, Chair Klein,
Yes?
Vice Chair Makachuk,
Aye.
Dr. Tyson,
Yes.
Walia,
Aye.
Meadows,
Yes.
Edith Beltran.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you, Mara. Next is item 4, recommend to the SVCE Board of Directors approve SVCE's participation in California Public Utilities hourly flex pricing pilot.
So this is a presentation by Sitwali Sandoval, and I can guarantee you that this is going to take us more than 30 minutes because it's just such an interesting presentation and really kind of a preview of things to come by way of the types of products and programs and dynamic rates that we'll be offering in the future. So with that said, from a time perspective, what are we thinking?
So I think it's going to go to the board. It's whether or not we can compress, we have this one in 10 minutes after. Is everyone fine going?
We can skip the last one because it's just an information item. But if it's okay, could we go, is it okay to go over a little bit?
I think.
All right, so Ollie, do the full thing.
We started a few minutes late, but I think it's important. This is important, yeah.
And we have a lot of staff here because a lot of staff worked on this, by the way. So.
We got snacks, if I may jump in. I'm good going longer.
I don't have snacks.
All right. Okay, so I will be, as Monica said, presenting on the CPUC hourly flex pricing pilot and SVC's potential participation in this pilot. So the purpose of the presentation is to ask the executive committee to recommend that the board approve SVC's participation in this upcoming hourly pricing pilot. But before we get into the details, I want to get three things. I want to highlight three things, and I'm hoping that if you remember anything from this presentation, it's these four things. The first is that the hourly flex pricing pilot is CPUC designed, and it's PG&E administered, and it's a 3-year pilot. And the idea here is that our participation will benefit our customers who decide to enroll in the pilot. It will help us as an organization learn about hourly rate implementation And it'll also really help the state, so the energy regulators in California. And finally, it will support compliance with the California Energy Commission's load management standards. And so your recommendation that the board approve our participation will let staff roll out the pilot and take on any contracting or implementation actions that we may need. And then finally, and very importantly, if we do not participate, then if we have any customer that is interested in enrolling in the pilot, they would need to opt out of SVCE to participate. So let's dig into the rest of the details here. So I want to talk about the policy regulatory landscape. And there's two energy regulating agencies in California, the California Public Utilities Commission and the California Energy Commission, which we all know about. But they are both increasingly focused on shifting usage out of the costly and dirty hours of the day. And so how they're doing this is that the California Energy Commission introduced the load management standards regulations to push widespread adoption of demand flexibility, and the California Public Utilities Commission adopted this, approved of this pilot. And so they want, they have found that we need stronger and more granular signals than the time of use periods that we have today. And so the graph on the right is the duck curve graph that we've all seen, and it's the CAISO hourly average net load for the past couple of years. And so what we're trying to do here is the end of the day hours that you see circled in red, we're trying to push that demand and that usage into the middle of the day when we have all of the renewables and the solar on the grid to flatten out that curve. And this push really supports SVCE's goals and our interests and our customers' interest in getting a cleaner grid in California and lowering costs to operate the grid and also for ratepayers. So moving on to the next slide. I want to call out a little more specifically and why these pilots are important to our compliance with the load management standards. And you might remember that last spring, the board adopted SVC's first load management standards compliance plan, and we were required to file that to the CEC because of the load management standards regulations. And in the plan, we did a couple of things. We explored rates and programs to meet the load management standards regulation goals. And very importantly, we described our intent to participate in the HFP pilot. And so ultimately, if the board decides to approve our participation, that will help us execute on what we said was in our plan. So it'll help us execute on the contents of the plan and therefore meet our LMS obligations. So now let's get into the actual pilot detail. There's several customer segments. You can see them all in the table, but they all share the same CPUC directed hourly pricing incentive structure. And that's very important to call out because that's what this pilot is. It's an hourly pricing incentive structure. It's not an hourly rate. And we'll get into how that incentive structure is laid out. But I just wanted to show you the applicable classes and the applicable rates. So moving on to the next slide. The pilot is not the only thing that we're working on related to demand flexibility at SVC. We have a growing portfolio of programs and stuff that we're doing because we really see broader strategic value in demand flexibility and shifting load. And so demand flexibility is great because it helps us better match our demand to our supply.
Should she be advancing the graphics?
Oh.
Because you're looking at something different than.
Thank you. I was going to get into it. So I
Okay,
just
all right.
want, yeah, thank you.
That's all we're looking at.
She's fine. She's great.
No, but thank you.
No, that's why nobody wants to sit next to me.
But yes, I do have some graphics coming up, but I just wanted to say that this is all key to unlocking a cleaner and cheaper grid of the future. And so I'm not going to go into all of these in detail, but in case you're wondering, we've got several things already happening. The Lights on Silicon Valley program, our electric homes rate, the grid shift program, and then we have an RFP out that's looking for comprehensive demand flexibility solutions. So if we participate in this pilot, it will really just be part of this broader portfolio, and we're already doing things before California's regulators even implemented these load management standards, which is great. And so now getting into how the pilot is structured, as I mentioned before, the pilot is not a new rate that will be charged to customers. It's an hourly incentive mechanism that's actually completely separate from what the regular bill is that a customer will pay on a monthly basis, which is a bit complicated to understand at first, but it's a good way for California to dip its toe into hourly rates. And so that's why the CPUC designed it this way. So what happens is that the hourly price is only applied to the customer's change in load from their previous year baseline. And every month they pay their normal monthly bill, and they also receive informational only performance report. And so the way that a customer who's enrolled in this pilot saves is that they reduce their load from the baseline during high hourly price hours, the peak, and then they increase their load from their baseline compared to their baseline during the low hourly priced hours, which is the off-peak. And after 12 months, all of these performance reports are trued up and kind of aggregated, and the customer receives whatever their net savings were. So they get a bill, they get a credit. And what's built into this is bill protection, because the customer pays their normal monthly bill, and then the net total when the end of the year annual reconciliation happens, that will never result in the customer paying more than what their normal bill was. So that's how customers are protected. There's really no disincentive. You can only win by participating in this pilot. So moving on to the fiscal impacts, or our analysis of what they could potentially be. So the thing though is we don't know how many of our customers will enroll. We really don't know how they will shift their load. And so everything depends on the scale of the uptake and their response and customer responses to prices. And it also depends on what the actual market prices are. So we like to think of the impacts to the organization and then to SVCE's customers. For the impacts to SVCE, when the customer receives the annual true-up credit, SVCE covers the cost of those customer savings, the annual true-up credits. But we don't expect a substantial budget impact because the pilot is cost neutral from a power supply perspective. So the customers are shifting their load out of the most expensive hours, and that's offset by savings that we would realize from our power supply costs. And then we also are eligible to receive a CPUC funded incentive, which is based on the amount of load of SVC load that we enroll in the pilot. And then for the customers, they will have this really awesome opportunity to receive this performance incentive in the form of the annual credit if they are able to shift their load based on those hourly signals. And we are expecting the customer savings to be around $2 million, but they could range from $200,000 to $8 million, and it all depends on how are they opting in, the market prices, changes in usage, So it's really quite a range here because this is the first time California does this kind of experiment with real-time, with something close to a real-time price, but as I said before, it's an incentive mechanism. And so there's bill protection, so there's no risk for the customers. And they will also be able to access CPUC-funded incentives, for example, for equipment costs. So moving on to why we want to participate. As I was just saying, California right now has no data on how customers would respond to hourly rates. And so we want to test the effectiveness of hourly price signals and really for the first time understand how big could the impact be? Is there even going to be a significant impact? What is, for example, the role of automation service providers in helping customers respond to hourly prices because we don't know that yet. And then we also want to test, I'm obviously hungry because test the effectiveness of this hourly incentive baseline approach and to see if it works, or after the pilot, usually after pilots you evaluate it, you modify for when you put together the full program. So we want to see if our customer and SVCE energy savings materialize, and then we want to ensure that if customers are interested in this, they stay with SVCE. Because as I said earlier, if we don't participate, they would have to opt out to participate in this pilot. So in terms of the actions needed to move forward, we will need to enter into an agreement with PG&E and submit an advice letter to the CPUC. And then shockingly, but not shockingly because this is very complex, the implementation details are still being finalized. And so there's a lot of players here. There's the CPUC, there's the PG&E as the administrator, and there's all the CCAs that are participating. So we may also need to adjust the method for the annual performance reconciliation or enter into other agreements with other vendors. And then the good thing is that we have the option to stop new customer enrollment at any time. So the pilot is a 3-year pilot, but we can stop customer enrollment at any time and we can adjust if needed, which is really great. And then I will close up with the concluding thoughts and then highlight what the request is again. So our participation is really, really key for LMS compliance and for our exploration and learning of dynamic pricing, otherwise known as real-time pricing or hourly rates. And so we're requesting that the board of directors approve our participation in the HFP pilot for the eligible agricultural, residential, and commercial customers as aligned with PG&E's, the PG&E administered offer and with delegation to staff to implement the pilot. And so the schedule here is that we are hoping to get board approval next month. After that, we would submit our participation letter to the CPUC, and then in the summer of 2026, the pilot would go through its midterm evaluation. And so during this entire time, 2025 to 2027, we would continuously assess the pilot impacts and think about our demand flexibility options beyond the pilot, because it obviously is a pilot, so it's temporary. Yeah, we will definitely come back to the board with an explanation of how things are going. And I think that's all I have for this presentation. Any questions?
Thank you. I'm assuming there are questions from directors. Vice Chair, go right ahead.
Okay. I'm really interested in this, and I've been looking forward to it for a whole bunch of different reasons. And my first question is, what is the cost? But it sounds like the cost to SVCE is not there's going to be no cost per se. Is that correct?
Per se, yes.
Okay. My other question, and I was just writing them down as you were going through, is how will SVCE market this to our customers? And I think it's going to be, they're going to wonder what's going on. But I think you've got that covered in your plan.
Yes, well, so Beth has been working very closely with PG&E for the past year, if you can believe it, to try to sort this out. PG&E has a marketing plan, and they're coordinating with the CCAs that are choosing to participate.
Okay. What if a customer changes their rate plan during the pilot?
So they still have to be on one of the eligible
Rate plans?
yeah, the ones that were.
It's slide 5.
Oops. They still have to be on one of these eligible rates.
Okay. Because right now, I, for example, am on EV2A, but I'm hoping to get on to, and hope isn't a strategy, I plan to get on to the e-elect rate.
Okay, you'd still be eligible.
So that's all fine. Okay. And then I'm wondering, some customers may wonder about their data privacy and how they're doing this. Have you considered that?
Yes, we have, and so has PG&E, and they would have to sign an agreement, which is still being sorted out, right? Yeah.
When is the annual performance reconciliation? I'm not sure if the annual.
The true up. It's 12 months after you've been on the pilot. So it's every 12 months.
Oh, okay, because I'm a solar customer, and I have my annual true up is when it's a anniversary date. So I'll have a couple of true ups then. Okay.
May I interject for a minute? So one of the things that's being considered is to do the true up for these pilots at the same time as a solar customer would get their true up.
That would
under
be
consideration now.
That would be a good thing, because I always pay in my true up, but if there was some way to get a credit there, that would be nicer for me. Anyways, I was a pilot participant way back in the day when electric vehicles were first coming out, and I got a free charger, but I had to have it connected to the internet, and I had to agree for my data. But and now I'm going into a comment. I would certainly participate in this. So those are my questions. Thank
Does that
you.
mean you have to recuse yourself? Anyway.
Okay.
Thank you. Director Meadows?
Thank you. Yeah, so interesting presentation. I'm also going to ask a question around the solar customers and their true up. So if you're a solar customer with or without storage, and you have basically a true up where you've paid generated electricity that's covered your needs, are those customers motivated to participate in this program? I mean, do you get, if you're already at a zero cost, are you going to get money back through this program, or are you not really motivated to participate?
You want to talk, because you've talked about a credit versus a check.
Yes.
Yeah,
So when you shift your time, especially if you shift from peak to off peak, regardless of whether you're a NEM customer or not, you're still going to get savings. Your NEM program is very separate from this hourly flex price pilot. They're two very different compensation models.
Okay, so they're independent. So so a net customer is still has an incentive to participate in this pilot, is what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Director Walia?
Thank you. Great presentation, very exciting. I will follow up pretty much on what Brian was asking earlier. This rolls out per the schedule in November that we are talking of, right? That we ask CPUC, we let them know that we're going to participate if you're on track. Then how quickly and how effectively can we market it to the customers? That's my key question. And how, what were the assumptions you put into calculating the, or gauging the cost savings when you said there's this wide range?
Yeah. So I'll do the marketing question first, and Beth, maybe you might want to jump in, but essentially the program is in a soft launch, and so because we've been working with PG&E really closely, it would be pretty quick in terms of their ability to enroll. And then in terms of the assumptions, I have them here in the appendix. So there's not a lot of there aren't a lot of studies out there on how much customers would be able to shift load. So we, our staff looked at a couple of things. They looked at an Oak Ridge National Lab study to understand how the B20 customers might respond. And then for the EV customers, they looked at average monthly consumption for EV customers and then tweaked the medium case a bit to establish the low and high scenarios. And so it's really based on the study and also our knowledge of these customer types. And then it was scaled up to get a sense of what the other rate classes would do. So we focus on these classes because that's where we see the most impact potentially happening. And so that's why we chose those.
The dollar amount savings is another set of assumptions, right? What the dollar savings would be. This is the volumetric shift.
It's also numerical, how many people sign up too, though, right?
Exactly,
Yes.
yes.
Exactly.
So, thank you. And that's why I asked the two questions together. So this is great. I mean, you have to get started with a pilot to move forward a few years down the road
exactly.
to get the effective change in terms of reducing emissions. So are we going to be, in terms of marketing, are we going to be targeting these specific where there is a big bang for the buck? How are we targeting the potential customers? Because that's what I keep on coming down to, the outreach.
Well, the first start will be to get it on the website to make sure that any customer that's interested can easily learn more.
How do you tell them that it's there? To go to the website?
Yes, so the next step would be the actual positioning, and I think it makes a lot of sense to focus on it by device, right? If you can focus on our EV users, you can focus on our heat pump water heater, and those are the folks who can truly start shifting their electrical use.
So do we send them emails?
Probably the most affordable way. We haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay, I was just, I know you haven't sorted out the answers. This is just my way of, let us think through to be able to get more customers enrolled, the earlier the better, rather than the whole big segment.
Yeah, wait a minute, I think Jessica has something to say.
Oh, we can say something.
Maybe?
Oh, yeah, well, also similar to the ELEC rate, which is something that is led by PG&E and customers enroll through PG&E. We are still trying to understand what PG&E is doing to market the pilot. And then, step one, as Beth said, is once someone sees it through PG&E, that they understand that they can still participate as a customer of ours.
Sure.
And because we've been marketing ELEC, which is another rate where it's got this load shifting element, we've learned a lot from doing that in terms of, hey, we need to try to focus on customers that can respond, that want to respond. There's some folks that would be very excited about this. There's some folks that would be overwhelmed by the concept of what's going on and why is this. And so we'll be thinking that through as we figure out how much we want to push and to whom, and then seeing who actually enrolls and what their experience is.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was wanting all of us to think about. So thank you, great.
Other questions?
You talked about a cap on the number of customers, like too many customers in the pilot. Did I hear that correctly or not?
I did, yeah.
No, you're correct. We wanted to have an opportunity to say, okay, if we have such great participation, and if indeed the customer savings, which Silicon Valley Clean Energy pays, is much greater than anticipated, we wanted the ability to say, stop. It's really just an ability to, there's so many unknowns. It's just an opportunity to put a stop to it if we need to.
Yeah, but it's not a cap in terms of here's the number that we have in mind and we'll stop there.
Oh, okay, because I could see this as something I could bring to the City of Monte Sereno residents, because I think they would benefit from this, but anyways.
Please do. We are looking for customers to enroll.
But so, yeah, so that was going to one of my questions was, what is the decision for turning customers away? So I understand we're giving you the authority. What is the shift, or what's the straw that's like, oh, we need to stop? And it'll go to my next question, which you can order them in either way. You talked about from a risk standpoint, from a cost standpoint, the CPUC, the state is looking to help defer. What is our true cost conceivably? And I know a lot of this is, let's say, somewhat nebulous. It's, $200,000 to $8 million.
Realistically.
Which we don't know where it's going to fall, but do we have any idea? Let's say it's 8 million. Just let's do the worst case, not worst case. But is that 8 million we think the CPUC will cover 50%, 75%, 100%, and just to get a better idea. And I'll let you order those because I'm assuming they are tied together in some way.
So the CPUC isn't covering any of it. And they are covering some incentives. So there's an incentive payout. Let's see here.
Right.
Yeah, so we, based on the amount of load that we enroll, but we cover the cost of those savings. So the 2 million, the most realistic, the medium case is the 2 million.
Okay.
And so
I didn't understand the difference between our cost versus quote unquote incentives. And so maybe you can clarify incentives for me.
Right. So when the program was being developed by the CPUC, they were trying to figure out how to get CCAs to want to participate because CCA could just do its own program. But a lot of the customers in PG&E's territory are CCA customers. And so because our admin costs and our cost to cover the savings aren't covered, they are giving us $20 per kilowatt year as just an incentive, and it's capped at 3.6 million for all of the CCAs in PG&E's territory. And so it kind of depends on, okay, there's 12 in the territory, divide that by 12. So the number we actually get is a bit
Trivial. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I understand, and I remember something in there now, of course, about the 3.3 and split. Okay.
Yeah.
Chair Klein, just to also clarify, when we say we think it's going to be cost neutral to us because power supply costs will go down, as customers shift their load, we also shift our power supply costs. And theoretically, we're moving from expensive marginal cost to a lower cost, right? And so that's the theory behind all of this. And I think it's a good point to say, like, what is that trigger that might cause us to want to put a halt on this? It could be it could be a dollar number. It could also be, this doesn't work, right? And we're hearing lots of complaints, and that might be something, but we'll evaluate that. Maybe we can include some suggestions, but I don't know if we know enough to know right now when to set a stop on this.
Understood. I was just wondering if there was a trigger and understanding that, it's like how we make that decision. I know it's probably at the midpoint or somewhere, it's somewhere down, years from now, not like, okay, it depends on how many people are signed up and everything else, okay? And then same questions about publicity and how we market it, and I understand those questions have been asked before, so that's all I have. Vice Chair, did you?
Is there any other?
I can't tell. Raise your hand remotely if you actually want to speak. Okay, Vice Chair.
I had a question, but I didn't write it down, sorry. But this is all, my questions that have been answered.
Okay, good. We'll go to the public. Any comments?
I can't resist. This is a very exciting thing. It's something I've talked to Justin about, wishing that there were, stronger signals. So Three questions that I'd love to hear an answer to eventually. One is, I understand most residential customers are on TOUC, which is not an eligible rate class. So will it be possible for somebody who's ELEC or EV2A to make the switch and enroll in the pilot in one phone call? Or will they have to do what I'm going to do, which is to call PG&E this afternoon and say, I want ELEC now. I've always been eligible, but now I want it because I see what's coming. So that's one question. Another is, well, what's the incentive? Are we talking tenths of pennies per kilowatt hour or dimes per kilowatt hour? That will strongly influence how interested I am. But since there's a no loss provision, I'll do it no matter what the answer to that question is. And let's see. There are certainly segments of the customer population that this is ideal for. And I'm thinking of people whose children have just gone off to college, so they automatically are using less electricity than they did when their nest was fuller. And retirees like myself have a tremendous amount of flexibility over when we charge our electric cars and do other things around the house. So this is potentially significant savings to families who may be quite interested in saving money if they have kids in college or they're on a fixed income. So there are two potential ways to spin it and focus on a segment. But if the move from TRUC to one of the other two eligible rates is hard to do or it isn't explained, then a lot of people feel disappointed.
Yeah. So on that, those are PG&E questions because you have to call PG&E to change your rate. And I don't know if the same customer service rep can enroll you in the pilot. Hopefully they can, but we can definitely ask our PG&E counterparts and get back to you on that. In terms of what the incentive is, it depends on market prices. And then your third question, could you remind me what it was again?
Well, it should have been, how will I find out what the rates are today or tomorrow? Yes. How's that communicated? And is it, a text or an email, or is it some signal through the ether?
Yeah, so their PG&E will have a website that with essentially a page that updates continuously, and you can see the prices there.
Day ahead, hour ahead, absolutely real time?
Yeah, you can see them, their day ahead prices, but I believe you can see them the week in advance.
Thank you. Any member of the public remote?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the directors for a motion.
I move that we approve the recommendation in agenda item number 4.
Thank you. Vice Chair?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Any other comments? I think it's, it's great. And thanks for, I'm sure lots of staff time went into this. It's such a, let's say, moving target in so many, affects so many different areas in the organization. So thank you for this. And I think it'll be positive as we hopefully move forward and load shift people in a big way. So great. With that, may we have a vote?
Yes. Chair Klein?
Yes.
Vice Chair Makachek?
Aye.
Director Tyson?
Yes.
Walia? Aye. Meadows?
Yes.
Ms. Patran?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. And so for item 7, we said, just go ahead and move it to a future date, or is it something that you want to bring?
Future date is fine. It was just an update by Tony Zulo on fleet
electrification. Okay.
And it is provided in the packet. Certainly if you want to review it and if you have any questions of staff, feel free to send them as well.
Thank you. Any final committee or staff remarks?
Oh, I'd like to say thank you to the full team. Michaela did a fabulous job in planning that trip to Victory Pass Solar Plus Battery. And who else was there? Emily, Sophia, Willie. Chris came from quite a distance. So it was a great trip, very successful. It was 103 degrees in the morning. We survived it. And it was good to see a project. This was my first trip to a project, and I want to thank everyone who made it possible and also all of those who encouraged me to go. Seeing is believing. So big thanks all around. And for the board meeting, let's bring that thing whatever we got.
Oh, the award. Oh, yeah, I have that.
Something,
Let me look at it.
but not right
No,
now.
it's
You can
fine.
bring it to the board, Monica. Yeah.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I just had board meeting. Let's do that so we can show it off.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, and my apologies. Brian was there and thankfully very much on time and I deeply appreciate your, he was great. He picked me up.
Tina said, okay, we'll carpool there, but we have to leave my house at 6 a.m. So it's like, okay, and I was on time.
He was ahead of time. Thank you, Brian.
But that was wonderful to be there. And I think the networking and seeing the CCAs that were involved and the whole team that put that together. And that was $1 billion project. I mean, it was significant. It was a day well spent, and thank you to the staff for coordinating it and making it happen.
Fantastic. Nothing else remotely? No? Okay, so we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 12:05 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for using up part of your lunch hour. Thank you. Take care.
Glad you enjoyed it.